a friend of mine, Shlomo Soham, was the future intelligence executive of the Knesset, appointed to look at how all the laws passed in the Knesset would look in the future, to future generations. Very good man, a judge. But what's happening in today's Knesset is totally different. It's just unbelievable. And the footage I watched this morning was about a case that came of a particular Palestinian who was raped in a prison by Israeli Defense Forces, a man. They raped him violently, you know. And then there was a debate in the Knesset, was this acceptable behaviour by the Israeli Defense Forces? And the chap was known, it was known who he was, and a bunch of peace activist types went to this Israeli Defense Force like base and said, you know, try him, he's a criminal, can't rape prisoners. And in the Knesset, this guy was defending it and saying, no, it's totally legitimate, they're evil, what they did, you know, all Palestinians are evil, and basically if we want to rape them, and sorry, I don't want to get too graphic, but let's just say it was the most vicious and violent kind of form of rape. He said, no, that's totally fine. You can't prosecute that guy. He was doing it for Israel. And this was an MP in the Knesset. Yeah. You know, I just find the quality of debates going on in these kind of parliamentary chambers should be reviewed. There should be higher standards. And I've had some dealings with the International Parliamentary Union, of which all these bodies belong to. And they do have certain ethical standards and codes, you know. I would have thought those debates break the rules. And that, just to finish on this point about politics, I don't know if you've picked up on my suggestion, which I made actually when I was living in Scotland at the Castle of the Muses, that all MPs, I was thinking in terms of British politics to begin with, should have to swear an oath of veracity when they take office. You know, I swear, like when you go to court, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You know, swear on the holy book. And if you're, you know, and if you break that, then that's an offence. I think MPs should have to, and Lords should have to make the same oath. And then if they break it and they lie, they would lose their right to sit as a member of Parliament.
Maybe that should be, I mean, the guy in the US of A also swore on the Bible.
It's meaningless if you don't stick to your word, you know.
It is. And there should be, as you said, it should be if
it's a sacking offence.
Yeah.
If I mean, I'm a teacher, right, and I worked in many great schools, and if I lied, I'd be sacked.
Yeah.
The same as if I was a doctor. If I was a doctor and I was telling people they had cancer and they didn't, I'd be sacked. There are professional standards, but the only profession that doesn't have a professional standards body is politicians. They don't have anyone. They can do anything they want. And so I actually wrote to Obama when he was president, just before he stepped down, and told him about my oath of veracity idea, and I pleaded with him. He still had 40 days left in office. I said, put that in place, because otherwise it's going to get worse.
Otherwise it's going to be meaningless.
I never got a reply, you know. So anyway, as an Aristotelian Platonic philosopher, I'm going to still keep at it, trying to get ethics into the mindset of these people. So anyway, good choice. Right, let's do our gods cards, because we need some divine help here. Things are getting rough.
We need help a lot.
We need some divine help and assistance. Help!
Left, right, and centre.
Yeah. There we are. Hang on. Right. Oh.
Dick in the deck, we call it.
No. I just want to have them presenting all the same way up.
Try to Get the top one out of those.
Okay. Go for it.
There we go.
Okay.
Finally.
Good. Now you present them to me and I'll choose one this time, Jake. Ha. Right. There we are. Let's see this one. Thank you. Okay, what have you got? Cheers.
I've got
Ah,
9 God.
you've got God. That's a really cool card, and we did say we needed some help.
We really needed
So-
some help.
Yeah, so we've got God, which is one of the cards of the Tarot of the Gods. And I thought we ought to have a card for God, obviously,
Yeah.
because, it's a very interesting word, God. Actually, I've done a lot of research on this when I was teaching full time. And I'm sure you can help me out with the Norse and Norwegian, but in English, God is the word we use for the supreme deity. And, that's what philosophers talk about. But originally, it's etymologically connected to the word good. The word God and the word good come from the same etymology. And they ultimately go back to a root which is the same as the word gathering or togetherness. If you gather something, you bring it into a place of goodness. Goodness is what brings people together. And the force that is behind all that, behind goodness, is God. Now that's the etymology which I discovered. And what is the word for God in Norwegian?
Good. G-U-D.
Well, there you are, you see. And the word for good?
Good.
Right.
Right,
So
the opposite.
it's the opposite, right. And that used to be the case in Old Anglo-Saxon. The word for good used to be pronounced
Good.
good, and the word for God used to be pronounced
Good.
right. So basically, it's the same word.
It's just the 3 letters,
Yeah,
either O or U in the middle.
yeah. G-O-D or G-U-D.
Yeah.
And because I love etymology, I've gone into this in all languages, and it is a fact that God represents goodness.
Never thought of that.
Ah, well, there we are. And that's what we're lacking, you see.
Yeah.
I used to have this argument with kids that would say, I don't believe in any religion, I don't believe in God. And I would twist it around, I'd say, so you don't believe in goodness, do you? That's what you're saying. You don't like, to be good to your parents and do the washing up occasionally, So if you shift the debate to the question of goodness, most people say, no, I do believe in goodness. I want to be a good person. And then I would say, well, that's what the God thing is about. It's learning how to be that good person.
Yeah, I think so.
And then they would eventually get it. The penny would drop. So, so I love language. That's why I love etymology. But thank you for sharing that. The Norwegian, that's brilliant. And so because I have a sense of humour, I made God the card of the hermit in the tarot, because I was trying to think, well, which card of the tarot would you have as God?
Number 9.
Number 9 is the hermit, who stands for meditation, solitude and consciousness, and he's very hard to find because he's hiding away. And that seems to be the problem with God, Everyone's talking about God and invoking him and blah, blah, blah. But very few people have ever met God or know what they're talking about. They think he's in their book, but not that book.
Well, he's supposedly everywhere
And nowhere.
and nowhere.
So I think the hermit card fits in very well. And I just finished reading this wonderful talking book by Sarah Maitland called Silence, the Book of Silence. She went off as a Christian mystic to go into the remote wilds of Scotland and just get into silence. And she writes brilliantly about the experience and what it is to be a hermit. They felt that to find God, you have to go into silence as a hermit. And, you know, people here in La Creuse, great saints used to do that. And some still do. We have a monk who lives in the abbey locally. He's deeply into the silence of God. So the card, I think, is saying to us, to get out of the problems we're facing as a planet, we have to all look deeply within, find our own goodness, and let that ripple out and spread, you know. And gradually that goodness will reassert its natural intelligence, which is what we are. We're all fundamentally good. It's just some of us have lost it. And so that's a good card to have got. Thank you. Right, what did I get? That's well, I love this card. The Ace of Air, Nabo. Have you seen that card?
I think I had it
At one point.
at one point, yeah.
Okay. So I love this card because he is the card of scholarship and writing and learning. And he was famous in the Mesopotamian culture. So this is him in front of a ziggurat, like a temple for scholars. And his scribes and philosophers like me, we were his priests in ancient Mesopotamia. If I was now living in 2000 BC in Iraq, I'd be a priest of Nebo because they invented writing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, essentially. They were doing the same in Egypt, and Nebo was called Thoth there. But in Mesopotamia, it was priests of Nebo. And so, and what we've done, archaeologists have discovered all these ancient, archives of cuneiform writing, and that's why he's got cuneiform on his sort of uniform now as a priest, which was made by pressing wooden spatulas into damp clay, and then you drew out the letter shapes. And archaeologists have dug up all these archives, which is why we know about the legends of the ancient Mesopotamians. It was because of these priests of Nebo. And in the text, anyway, I give lots of details about it and who discovered it and which archaeologists. And so a lot of what's in the Bible turns out to have been written down first by priests of Nebo, because when the Jews were living in Mesopotamia, they borrowed some of these legends, like the flood story and things. And I'd say, really, I think what this card is saying, as well as finding our primal goodness and invoking God, we need also to get our minds working, use our reason, use our scholarship, do things like I've just done. I've done a Nebo treatment on the Gospel of Matthew, right? Nobody's ever been crazy enough to write such vast details, 450 footnotes on one Gospel. Well, that's a Nebo priest in action, right? And that's my delight. You know, I love scholarship. That's why I'm an academic. And I think academia is a really sacred thing. We should have more of them. And we should have more combination between academics and ethics. So, you know, instead of shutting our theology departments, I would give some funding from the military departments to more Nebo studies and more God studies. Because only if we increase our ethics as a planet are we going to get out of our problems, in my opinion. And then people like Trump couldn't get away with the nonsense they're doing.
No.
Because we'd be more morally aware of what's going on. I mean, a lot of people are, obviously, thank God. But there's we can up the awareness, really. Okay, any comments or final words of wisdom from you?
Words of wisdom.
Have you heard of Nebo before? Did you ever get to Mesopotamia in your travels? Iraq?
No, I've never
Gulf.
been there.
No. It's a bit of a flashpoint, you know, Houthis and all that. I think.
I've sailed around it.
Right.
I've been through. We were.
To Yemen?
No, I've been to Iran, Bandar Abbas.
Okay.
I've been to Kag Island. I've been to Iraq.
Oh, okay. So you did go to Iraq.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course it is.
yeah. What were you? Were you on a ship
On a
docking
ship,
in
yeah.
Iraq,
Yeah.
and then you went and explored a bit?
Up the river, and it was never been any love lost between Iran and Iraq for some reason. The pilot was very up the river,
Right.
and sometimes you needed to go.
Which
to
river were
Iran.
you on? The Euphrates or the Tigris?
I assume it's Tigris, the border river between
Yes, that's the one towards Persia.
Iran.
Yeah. Okay.
So
You went inland a bit.
Yeah, upriver, just
Yeah.
up the river, one
Right.
of the harbours there, and
Was this before the Gulf War and everything?
it was first time I was there was before the Gulf War,
Yeah.
and that was just after the
91 was the first Gulf War. Wasn't
Yeah.
it? So it's just before that.
yeah.
That was a disaster. The whole thing.
Yeah, that was I was, and I know 80 must have been
Late 80s.
83, I think 84.
Ah. Must have been fascinating.
It was fascinating.
Yeah.
We went through the Suez Canal as one of the first few weeks after they reopened it after the Yom Kippur War.
Okay.
Or Yom Kippur was it, or the 6 Days War, I think it was called.
Right. In the early 70s.
Yeah, and that
So-
was sort of houses and buildings along the canal was
Had been blown up.
blown up, and there was bullet holes in them. It was
Yes, I'm just totally against the violence that war brings. Totally unnecessary. And I just want to finish with one last reflection. In my commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, I've been bringing in, like I say, loads of other stuff. And one thing I was looking at is the apocalyptic, like when they're sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples say to Jesus, towards the end of the Gospel, what's going to happen in the future? Tell us what signs we should look out for the end of time. What's going to happen? Is it going to get really bad before it gets better? And they're all panicking away, right? And Jesus gives a discourse about like what the signs will be and will it be bad? Yes, it's going to be terrible wars like you wouldn't believe, etc., etc. And so this gives me an opportunity to explore the idea of epochs in world history. Jesus had a particular angle on this in what's called eschatology. You know, what is the future going to be? Will it be more of the same, or will it get worse? You know, is there going to be a last judgment? You know, we're all going to die. I mean, what's going to happen here, right? This is the field called eschatology. And I then looked at, in my commentary, in the footnotes, one of the 450 footnotes, I went and said, okay, what the ancient Indians think about this. Because in the Indian, Buddhist and Hindu religions, they've thought about this for millennia. And they have this theory of yugas, that history, time, has a qualitative aspect to it. Sometimes things are really, really bad on this planet, and people don't respect their parents, their elders, they're cruel, they lie, they cheat, they steal, they kill, you know. No sense of morality at all. That's what's called Kali Yuga. Things are really bad in Kali Yuga. But then there are other times when actually things are really much better. People have an inbuilt sense of honour, truth, love, capacity, respect, kindness to elders, kindness to the disabled, and so on. And that's called Sat Yuga, the age of truth. And between the two, there are two other yugas. And one of them, the one before, because a lot of people say we're in we're in Kali Yuga, and it's terrible. But I was doing research and I discovered, no, there's this thing called the Dvapara Yuga, which is the era of polarization. And that's bad, but it's not quite as bad as Kali Yuga, when it's going to get really bad. And I thought, it's interesting, these Indian thinkers had worked this out, because things leave the era of truth when we get into this hyper-polarization of everything. And the human mind then can't think about, well, maybe it's both and. Maybe there's a bit of a conservative in me and a bit of a progressive. And, they're both useful medicine tools, which I can use when it's appropriate. Instead, no, it's everything that's either or. And it occurred to me we're actually in Dvapara Yuga, the era of extreme polarization, when everybody's arguing with everybody else. And from then it gets worse and goes to Kali Yuga. And what I was thinking in my commentary is, I think what Christ was trying to do is say, why can't we just go back to Sat Yuga and everybody remember how to love, how to tell the truth? That's the kingdom of God that he wanted, and that I want as a teacher. So anyway, that I think, and what happens with wars, the reason I don't like them is it all gets into this extreme polarization. So anyway, there's a thought to finish on. Final comments from you? What do you think?
I think that's
is there hope?
There must be hope. There must be hope.
Well,
at least for our children and grandchildren.
Yeah. You've got how many grandchildren here in the village?
4.
Yeah, amazing. And let's hope that in 50 years' time they'll have grown up and be having some kind of philosophy club here in the village, or keeping the torch of wisdom burning.
That the Russians and the others have stayed away, not invaded us. Yeah,
let's hope we've got philosophy clubs going in Russia and Ukraine too. Peace discourse.
That would be.
Yeah.
Good thought, just landed on. Yeah.
Quite. Okay, well thank you anyway for listening and coming and your comments, and let's leave it to God and Nabu.
Yeah.
The ace of air, Nabu. His wife was called Tashmetu, by the way. She's doing the filming in that. And God. We love them. Okay. Thank you.